Hi, welcome to Tale Wagging, a podcast where I tell ridiculous stories. Stories that you probably haven't heard. I've got one from history and one fairy tale. This is the isolation edition of Tale Wagging. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be magical. The history story I actually found while I was researching Mary Toft last week when we talked about the woman who gave birth to rabbits. And this just happened to be something further down on the page. And I was like, this can't be. This can't be a real thing. Yet it was. All right, Dan's not here yet, so I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. A long, long time ago, it was fashionable to have a hermit live in your garden, like a garden gnome. In fact, the garden gnomes you see in people's yards today directly descended from real-life hermits. And it was important to have one around. It was just very fashionable. So this is a story about fashionable hermits. All right. He's just going to miss the beginning of the story. He'll come in later. It's fine. So, some people nowadays really like garden gnomes, and they throw in a gnome statue along with their flowers and their shrubberies. But if you were a grand gentleman of the Georgian era of England, having lavishly landscaped grounds was not enough to impress. You needed to be extra, real extra. You needed an ornamental hermit. Hermits shun society, live in isolation to pursue higher spiritual enlightenment, and had been part of the British landscape. Then, they literally became part of their landscaping. Ba-dum-boom. Too much? I probably need like a sound effect for that. But Dan's missing out. So the French-style formal gardens were these like neatly trimmed lawns, these elaborately shaped box hedges and geometric gravel paths. England said, nah, we're going to pass on that in favor of these like winding paths that go past like romantic lakes, rustic clumps of trees, artfully crumbling follies. I had to look that up. I didn't know what a folly was. It's a decorative building that serves them around. And then you would place a really picturesque village constructed of brick or stone, maybe some gnarled tree roots or branches for effect, and maybe like put some shells and bones in there for like atmosphere in your retreat. And then there he'd be, your hermit. Having a resident hermit just quietly existence, and occasionally sharing some golden nugget of wisdom with visitors was a must-have accessory in England. You liking this, Dan? Fashionable hermit.
Oh.
Fashionable hermit. It was a thing. It was all the rage. So wealthy estate owners would put ads in papers offering food, lodging, even a stipend for those willing to adopt a life of solitude. They would hire real people to dress as druids, grow their hair long, and not wash themselves for years. And these hired hermits would lodge in shacks or caves or other rustic lodgings in rambling gardens. And like I said, this is mostly found in England, but it was also in Scotland and Ireland as well. And there's this book about it. Someone wrote a book all about it. It's called The Hermit in the Garden, From Imperial Rome to Ornamental Gnome by Professor Gordon Campbell. Mary wants to know, how do I get that job? Well, I'm going to tell you. Recruiting a hermit wasn't always easy. This is a direct quote from the book. Sometimes they were agricultural workers and they dressed in costume, often in a druid's costume. There was no agreement on how druids dressed. But in some cases, they wore what we would call a dunce's cap. It's a most peculiar phenomenon. So, how having a live-in hermit became fashionable goes all the way back to the Roman Empire. Roman Emperor Hadrian, who had a villa at Tivoli, which had a small lake with a structure in it that was built for one person to retreat. It gradually verged away from being this like thing about religious people isolating themselves for spiritual reflection to hermiting being like the 18th century profession for those willing to put up with all the stipulations. And it was actually hard. There was an ad that was put in this olden times version of Craigslist. And it said, the hermit is never to leave the place or hold conversation with anyone for 7 years, during which he is neither to wash himself or cleanse himself, way whatever, but is to let his hair and nails, both on hands and feet, grow as long as nature will permit them. Oh, you could look for that ad in the paper and answer it. What do you think, Dan? Is this a job you would want? Would you like the hermit life? Others ask their hermit for hire not to wear shoes, but also sometimes to entertain guests at parties with personalized poetry or wine service. Can you imagine just a shoeless person comes up to you? Would you like some more wine, ma'am? Perhaps a limerick. I'm very knowledgeable and weird. England was a strange place. Melancholy was all the rage, and this introspection and somberness of spirit was prized among the elite, and hermits had to embody this role. And it was hard to hire a good hermit. One story had a hermit hired for 3 weeks before he was found at the local pub and fired. Another story, people couldn't afford a hermit, so someone's brother posed as the hermit to get the right effect. There's a description for this famous residential hermit at the Hawkstone Estate in Shropshire. You pull a bell and gain admittance. The hermit is generally in a sitting posture, with a table before him, on which is a skull, the emblem of mortality, an hourglass, a book, and a pair of spectacles. The venerable barefooted father, whose name is Francis, if awake, he always rises up at the approach of strangers. He seems about 90 years of age, yet has all his sense to admiration. He is tolerably conversant and far from being unpolite. How marvelous. This is a description of him. Yeah, he's just the best. Tolerably conversant. It's a skill. You have to write this on your resume. Here's the funny thing. Apparently, he couldn't keep this up 24/7 because after visiting hours were over, this hermit was replaced with a mannequin. And after Father Francis died, it is said he was replaced with a mechanical hermit who moved and was lifelike. Like the presidential hall at Disneyland or something. What version of this could have possibly existed? Like, would you really go see a fake hermit? The robot. The robot hermit. Not real. Well, it got terrible reviews. They said that it wasn't natural enough. So clearly it wasn't that great. And if you couldn't afford your ornamental hermit, some people would just set up a lodging as if a hermit lived there, but then left, maybe they just went outside for a second to go contemplate life in a field. He just stepped outside. It's fine. Oh, it's like those little fairy gardens people make, and they're like, oh, there's a fairy in there. Like they just stepped out for a second. Maybe they went to go get a tooth. So the ornamental hermit vanished at the end of the 18th century and gradually evolved into a garden gnome. But in modern day, there is still one special hermit that lives high in the mountains of Austria. That is someone you can go visit. They've had a lodging up there that has been occupied by one hermit at a time for 350 years. Right now, it's a man named Stan Van Utrecht. Maybe. And he had to beat out 50 people who applied for the job. So, Mary, you could apply for this job, but this is a lot of competition. The Austrian mountain hermit. This is a working hermit. Visitors are allowed to come enjoy spiritual conversation with the resident hermit. I'm wondering, how much time are you really spending by yourself if people are coming to visit every day and converse tolerably? A lot. I want to show you this guy. This was the guy. One of the guys. This wasn't Father Francis. This was another guy. But this is what you want your hermit to look like. Look at his hands are in his lap. He's thinking really hard. He's contemplating. He's got a book, hourglass, to help him know that time is passing. Here's a nice structure. That would actually be pretty cool. Not gonna lie, that looks kind of neat. Very spooky. That's the story of the Fashionable Hermit. Dan, do you have any thoughts?
No.
Would you like to hire a hermit for our property? Would you like to be the hermit on our property? You already are. It's true. You are the hermit that streams. Fine. You are tolerably conversant, and that's why you have so many people that subscribe to you on Twitch.
That is true.
It's a skill. So, I wanted to find a great story about maidens in a tower. This was actually my second choice. I couldn't find the original one because I couldn't think of the title, but there had been a story where these 3 princesses were told by their dad, the king, like, stay in this tower. I'll be back later, and then just didn't come back. And someone broke into the tower, and it was like a whole thing. But that's not even the story I'm telling you. I'm telling you the story of Maid Maleen is her name. I don't know why more people don't know about Maid Maleen. It's like Rapunzel gets all the tower cred, but Maid Maleen is serious business. Maid Maleen is on it. So I've shortened the story because it was, of course, long. Shut up. Fine. Once upon a time, people fell in love and other people interfered. The end. Not really. Got you. It actually begins with Maid Maleen, who was the daughter of a king. I don't know why she's not called a princess, but that's her title. Dan has a lot of opinions about princesses, but clearly we don't have one in this story. She's a maid. Maid Maleen. Secret princess. Actual princess, but we don't call her a princess. So she and the prince of another kingdom fall in. Her dad isn't into it. He wanted her to promise her to someone else. He puts out an ultimatum. I can and will take no other for my husband. This is the one, the only one I'm going to marry. As a parent, really only one happens, and that is fly off the handle. The king flew into a passion and ordered a dark tower to be built, into which no ray of sunlight or moonlight should enter. Really hope she'll be able to breathe. Daughter. When it was finished, he said, therein thou shalt be imprisoned for 7 years, and then I will come and see if thy perverse spirit is broken. Really? Perverse to want to marry a person that's not the person you want, Dad? Judgy. Meat and drink for 7 years were carried into the tower, and then she and her waiting woman were led into it and walled up. This poor woman, what did she do? She just works here. That's my other big question. Like, eat and drink for 7 years. Is it jerky? What kind of jerky? Keeping for 7 years? I mean, meat and drink. It doesn't say vegetables. It doesn't even say bread or rice. Just meat and drink. This doesn't make sense to me. So they're in it. They're walled up. They're cut off from the sky and the earth. These 2 women sit in darkness. They knew not when day or night began. The king's son, her beloved, often went round and round the tower, calling out their names. Even remember there's another person in the tower, too. But no sound from the outside could pierce through the walls. Like, really? Can you imagine? Imagine you're stuck somewhere for 7 years in darkness with crap food, and you have no idea what's going on outside at all. You don't have Wi-Fi. You don't have a book. You don't even have an hourglass. I mean, come on, where's your skull and your hourglass so you can contemplate life and have spiritual something? Anyway, time passed. Food and drink were starting to run out, so they knew that the 7 years were coming to an end. Apparently, they were going to patiently wait. They waited for the king to come let them out, for anyone to come let them out, but no stroke of a hammer was heard. They weren't going to hear anything anyway. No stone fell out of the wall, and it seemed Maid Maleen had forgotten her, as they only had food for a short time longer and saw a miserable death awaiting them. Maid Maleen said, "We must try our last chance and see if we can break through the wall. Basically, we must do a Shawshank now. We should have done it sooner, but we're going to do it now." Took the bread knife and picked up the mortar of the stone, and when she was tired, the waiting maid would take a turn, and they just went back and forth, and with great labor, they succeeded in getting out one stone, second stone, a third, and then within 3 days, the first ray of light fell on their darkness in 7 years. And then after some more work, the opening was large enough that they could at least look out. And things had gotten weird. It was like the apocalypse. The sky was blue, there's a fresh breeze, that part's nice, but everything else had changed. Her father's castle lay in ruins. The town and the villages had been destroyed, and the fields far and wide lay to waste. No human visible. When the opening in the wall was large enough for them to slip through, the waiting maid jumped down first, Maid Maleen followed. But where are they supposed to go? Like, there had to have been a war. An enemy ravaged the whole kingdom, drove away the king, slain everybody that lived there. They got nothing. So they had to wander for days to seek another country, but they couldn't find shelter or a human being to get even a mouthful of bread. And their need was so great, they were forced to appease their hunger with nettles, which is a common plant with sharp hairs on it. Sounds very unappetizing and terrible. But you do what you gotta do. After much long journey, they came to another country and tried to get work everywhere. Anywhere they knocked, they were turned away. No one had pity on them. Finally, they got to a big city, went to the royal palace. They were ordered to go away. But a cook said, "Hey, you can stay in the kitchen and be scullions." That's fine. So they took it. Coincidentally, because it's a fairy tale, the son of the king, whose kingdom they were in now, was none other than the man who had been betrothed to Maid Maleen. Shocking revelation?
Oh.
Okay. He's engaged. We need a dun dun dun. Do you have one of those?
Totally.
Oh. I guess it's not working. Have I been not talking this whole time?
No, you.
Oh, okay.
That's not.
Oh, how about now? Okay, we don't have buttons.
You ruined it.
I clearly ruined it, as I ruin all technology. Okay. So, it had been 7 years, so his dad chose another bride for him. And this is where the story gets really judgy. The bride whose face was as ugly as her heart was wicked. Because totally coincide. The wedding date was set. The maiden had arrived, but because of her great ugliness, she shut herself in her room and allowed no one to see her. And it was Maid Maleen who brought meals to her from the kitchen. When the day came for the bride and groom to go to the church for the wedding, the bride was ashamed of her ugliness and afraid if she showed herself in the streets, she would be mocked and laughed at by the people. She tells Maid Maleen, "A great piece of luck has befallen thee. I have sprained my foot. Can't walk through those cobblestone streets. I need you to put on my wedding dress and take place. This is a great honor for you." Maid Maleen refused and said, "I wish for no honor that is not suitable for me." Bride offered her gold. Turn that down. At last she said, "If thou dost not obey me, it shall cost thee thy life. I have but to speak the word, and thy head will lie at thy feet." Okay. Maid Maleen is forced to obey, put on the bride's magnificent clothes and all her jewels. When she entered the royal hall, everyone was amazed by her great beauty. The king said to his son, Hey, this is the bride I chose for thee. I did good." The groom was pretty shocked. He said to himself, "He is like my Maid Maleen. I should believe it was her, but she's long been shut up in a tower or dead. I don't know which." So he takes this bride by the hand, leads her to the church, and on the way was a nettle plant. And then here's where Maid Maleen just gets weird. And she says things like, "Oh, nettle plant, little nettle plant, what dost thou here alone? I have known the time when I ate thee unboiled and when I ate thee unroasted." So basically, "Hey, nettle plant, I remember when I ate you raw." Ta-da! The king's son looks at her and he's like, What? What are you talking about?" Like, "Nothing. I was only thinking of Maid Maleen." He was pretty surprised she knew anything about her, but for some reason kept quiet. Then they come to a footbridge, and she says, "Footbridge, do not break. I am not the true bride." He turns to her and says, "What are you talking about?" And she says, "Nothing. I was only thinking of a Maid Maleen." He says, "Dost thou know Maid Maleen?" "Oh, no. How should I know her? I have only heard of her." Then they come to the church door, and she continues to be weird. And she says, "Church door, break not. I am not the true bride." Prince is like, "Why are you saying weird stuff?"
She
Yeah, she's really lost her people skills. She says, I was only thinking of Maid Maleen." I don't know why. So the prince takes out a precious chain and puts it around her neck and fastens the clasp. They enter the church. Priest puts their hands together. He married them. That part's done. We just breezed right over that part. And then he takes her home. She doesn't talk the whole way back. Thank goodness. Right? We don't have any more weird poetry. When they got back to the palace, she hurried into the original bride's chamber, took off the magnificent clothes and jewels, put her boring gray gown back on, kept nothing but that chain with the jewel on her neck, which she had gotten from the groom. When night came, the original bride was led to the prince's apartment. The ugly one. I'm sorry, but there's too many pronouns being not enough names for characters. She let a veil fall over her face so that he might not observe the deception. As soon as everyone left, he said to her, "What did you say to the nettle plant that was growing by the side of the road?" Like, "What nettle plant? I don't talk to nettle plants." That if it wasn't you, you're not the true bride. So she thought to herself, And then she tells him, "I must go to my maid who keeps my thoughts for me." And so she finds Maid Maleen and says, this is a direct quote, so I'm going to give it attitude. "Girl, what hast thou been saying to the nettle?" And Maid Maleen, I'm not going to say it again. She says what she said earlier. And she's like, okay, that's really weird. And then she repeats it back to the prince. She's like, "Oh, now I know what I said to the nettle. Here's the sad plant poem." And he's like, "Okay, what didst thou say to the footbridge when we went over it?"
on.
"To the footbridge? I don't talk to footbridges." "Then you're not the true bride." Let me go check with my maid who keeps my thoughts for me. They must be in a jar or something. I don't understand. Found Maid Maleen. Girl, what didst thou say to the footbridge? She gets the quotes, takes them back, and she also like smack talks. She's like, that cost thee thy life. Apparently she hates the thing said, but we all do, so it's understandable. Then he asks, what'd you say to the church door? I don't talk to church doors. You're not the bride. What'd you say? Blah, blah, blah. Got the words. And exchanges some more smack talk. That will break thy neck for thee, cried the bride. Break Maid Maleen's neck. Flew into a terrible passion, but hastened back into the room and said, I know now what I said to the church door. Here's what it is. So then, final question. Where's the jewel I gave you at the church door? She really hasn't caught on. What jewel? You didn't give me a jewel. Like, I put it around your neck. I fastened it. If you don't know that, you're not the bride. He takes the veil from her face, and when he saw her immeasurable ugliness, he sprang back terrified and said, How comest thou here? Who art thou? Ah! Says, okay, real with you now. I am thy betrothed bride, but because I feared people would mock me when they saw me outdoors, I asked the maid to dress herself in my clothes and church instead. Legit. And he says, well, where's the girl? I want to see her. So the bride runs out and tells the servants that the scullery maid was an imposter. They have to take her to the courtyard and strike off her head. Gonna ignore what the prince wants. The servants drag Maid Maleen, and she screams loudly for help. The king's son hears her voice, hurries out of the chamber, orders them to stop. And then he saw that she had the chain, and he said, Thou art the true bride who went with me to church. Come with me now to my room. And when they were both alone, he said, On the way to the church, we talked about Maid Maleen a lot, who was my original fiance. I feel like you look like her. A lot. What's up? And she said, I am Maid Maleen, who for thy sake was imprisoned 7 years, guilt trip, in the darkness, who suffered hunger and thirst, who has lived so long in want and poverty. Today, however, the sun is shining on me once more. I was married to thee, church. I am thy lawful wife. Then they kissed each other and were happy all the days of their lives. The false bride, she wasn't that false. She was the original bride. She got her head cut off. I guess for being ugly and a bad liar. Yeah, that's the story of Maid Maleen. So, isolation edition of Tale Wagging, locked in a tower for 7 years with no light and really boring food. Dan, thoughts about Maid Maleen? You want to go back to the tower?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to imprison Dan in a tower. What do you guys in chat think of these stories? Let me know. I read the comments that I missed. Hi, Pepper. Kitty says, I think that at some point in the history of English, meat was the word for food. This comes in the modern language with the word nut meat. That's very interesting. I did not hear that. Girl hasn't been neglecting arm day in 7 years, I see. Yeah, I mean, you didn't have anything else to do. You might as well do some push-ups. Maybe you can do some rows with some of the food or something. I don't know. Lucy loves story time. Yay! I'm glad. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm sure Dan is quite tired of stories now, and you've all been listening for quite some time. So with that, I'm going to end the stream. Thank you so much for sticking around for Tale Wagging. I really enjoy telling these ridiculously silly stories. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. I had a lot of fun tonight. I was really excited for this stream, maybe more than any of the other ones I've had so far, just because I was really excited to talk about what we were going to talk about during Derby time. And then these stories were just ridiculous. So it was just a fun double punch. Because a lot of times I'm like, I'm not sure how Derby's going to go, but I'm going to have fun with tail wagging. And this was a lot of fun today. God, that video game was... I loved it so much. All right, guys. Take care. Have a really great night. Keep taking care of yourself. And I will see you next week.